I saw a pretty like striking stat the other day where like Becky, I think, was the third fastest coach in WNBA history to get to 100 wins. And then I saw another stat like a week later that said that the Liberty had just won their 500th like game in franchise history, which is insane to me that like Becky Hammon in her 4 years in the WNBA is already one fifth as accomplished as the New York Liberty, one of the original franchises of the WNBA. So I think we got to be really careful about diminishing the overall like arc of Becky's legacy, right? Like coming into the W, immediately winning a title, winning another one, creating what like maybe the most dominant team of my lifetime in the Las Vegas Aces of 2023. Like that does not go understated.
Through our coverage this year with our audience, we had a just an audience member talk about the Aces, and they requested to jump into why the Aces are struggling this year. So I want to ask you that question first. A perennial power within the W, but they've been struggling. We've seen other teams rise up, and they with the Aces fall back. So what's kind of your feeling in terms of why the Aces are struggling this year?
Yeah, I think it's a 2 year sort of letdown, right? You have the historic record breaking season in 2023 when they go 34-6 during the regular season, win their second straight title, right? The first WNBA team to win back to back since the Los Angeles Sparks in '01 and '02, so more than 20 years. And basically since then, other than Asia Wilson, everyone on the team has gotten worse, right? Like Chelsea Gray, the foot injury sapped a lot of her lateral mobility. I think defensively, she's become a bit more concerning at the point of attack for Vegas. She missed so much of last season, even this year, like just hasn't been quite as impactful on both ends of the floor. Jackie Young, God bless her, just can't make a shot, right? Her 3 point percentage is so far down from what it was at her peak in those 2022-23 levels. Um, they turned Kelsey Plum into Jewel Lloyd, who just candidly I think is a just worse player than Kelsey Plum. Just doesn't handle the ball as well as Kelsey did. Not as threatening from every area of the court. Like she's a very capable 3 point shooter, but I think just collectively the offensive game that Plum provides, that downhole attack, something that they're really missing. And you've seen this for years with Vegas, where they had the most talented quartet in all of basketball, but did very little to augment the roster around that, right? Like they haven't made a first round draft pick since 2022. Like Kirsten Bell is the only player they've kept on the roster, and her contributions are kind of hit or miss, right? Like they've used a lot of future draft picks on other things. They lost so many veterans during the offseason, whether that was Sid Colson, Tip Hayes, Alicia Clark, admittedly, like all on the older side of their careers. They tried to replace them with younger players, already gave up on the likes of Tiffany Mitchell and Elizabeth Kitley. So I think it's sort of like a culmination of you got to go all in to win a title in 2023, but in the process, like they just let the rest of their roster sort of go haywire. And unless you still have the best quartet in all of basketball, which unfortunately they just don't have anymore because everyone's gotten a little bit older and only Asia Wilson has really maintained that level of production, I think the rest of the league just sort of caught up to them, right? They figured out their style, figured out how they wanted to defend them, and realized like if we just sell out on Asia, yeah, she's going to get hers, but we think we can handle the rest of this roster.
Do you think that their title window has closed just in terms of how much stark improvement a lot of teams have made this season? And then we have new teams entering the W. And I think that preconceived notion that expansion teams are going to struggle, I think that goes out the window with the Valkyries. So I just see kind of this era of Aces dominance kind of going away. Is that fair to say?
So, we have basically 80% of the league entering free agency this offseason. Every veteran other than Kalani Brown and Lexi Brown is going to be a free agent. Only the players on rookie contracts are still retained by their teams. So you look at a team like Vegas, if you keep Asia Wilson, who is at worst a top three player in the league, and you supplement that with some of the many free agents who are going to be on the roster, like on the market this offseason, I think there's a chance to reload. But I would say the window for this core, like the Young, Gray, Wilson core, I think there's going to have to be just significant changes to that for anything to happen.
Yeah, and I have questions about Becky Hammon's coaching because I think she, got a lot of credit, rightfully so, for, building that team and building the offense and building the defense and winning a title and being competitive. Has the past 2 years damaged her legacy any? Is she still one of the better coaches in the W, or is she being, passed by?
Yeah, I saw a pretty like striking stat the other day where like Becky, I think, was the third fastest coach in WNBA history to get to 100 wins. And then I saw another stat like a week later that said that the Liberty had just won their 500th like game in franchise history, which is insane to me that like Becky Hammon in her 4 years in the WNBA is already one fifth as accomplished as the New York Liberty, one of the original franchises of the WNBA. So I think we got to be really careful about diminishing the overall like arc of Becky's legacy, right? Like coming into the W, immediately winning a title, winning another one, creating what like maybe the most dominant team of my lifetime in the Las Vegas Aces of 2023. Like that does not go understated. Um, they do lose Natalie Nakase and Tyler Marsh from the bench this offseason. I think we're starting to see, like, especially in Natalie's case, how much she brought from a coaching perspective, from a development perspective, right? From just inspiring players on a regular basis. The job that she's doing in Golden State makes it clear, like, you don't just replace her and Tyler, right? Like, there's going to be a letdown when you lose two coaches of that caliber. Um, Admittedly, this is not her finest job. I tend to assign a lot of the credit to the Las Vegas front office or lack thereof. Like I just don't think the roster is built very well around Asia Wilson. So, you know, just based on everything Becky's done in the past, like I think about the series that she coached against Seattle in 2022. You know, just that epic barn burner against the Sue Bird, Stewie Jewell Lloyd Storm, and then the 2023 finals when they lose Chelsea Gray for the last game and still winning that game in New York. Like there's just so many positive points on her ledger that, yeah, this is a bad one. Obviously, this is not a good season for the Becky Hammon experience, but I'm more inclined to blame like the roster construction, and maybe she has a part in that, you know. But the Vegas front office situation is so nebulous that like, who's to say who's really making decisions there? But like the players, I don't think are putting like this is not a team that I would expect to contend based on who is taking the court, regardless of like what kind of coaching job Becky Hammon's doing.
Yeah, we've talked about the coaching. We talked about the coaching carousel last off season. How it seemed like coaches who you weren't expecting to be terminated ended up getting fired. I think we were both. We all of us were, surprised Chicago Sky made the move that they made.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about that coaching and how volatile sometimes uh, head coaching in the W can be, I mean, do you think Becky's here next year still? I mean, I a smart front office from my perspective would not even question that. But I mean, we've got a front office that, are they that smart?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple factors here. One, if Asia Wilson goes to bat for Becky Hammon, she's not going anywhere, right? Like this is not a situation where the Chicago Sky fired Teresa Weatherspoon, even though Angel Reese wanted her. Like Angel was a rookie. Asia is a multi-time MVP, two-time champion. I think she holds a lot more credence in the Las Vegas Aces organization than any other player really around the league. So if Asia wants Becky to stay, Becky will stay. Second thing is San Antonio Spurs filled their job, right? Like there's no NBA head coaching job that I think makes a lot of sense for Becky to step into, right? And I don't think she's at the position in her career where she wants to move laterally or down, like and take an assistant job at the NBA again. I don't think she really wants to move to another franchise in the WNBA, right? This is her place. She came up like obviously she originally played with the New York Liberty, but like her best years were with the San Antonio Stars, same organization, right? Mark Davis has empowered her to be a head coach for the first time. They've experienced a lot of success. I think she likes the lifestyle of being the Las Vegas Aces head coach. So I think something really dramatic would have to happen, like Asia leaving in free agency, or a split happening, like personality wise between the two of them, which seems unlikely to me. I think, as you said, like a competent front officer realizes, like, hey, over the arc of these 4 seasons, we've been pretty damn good, right? So I think we should just try to ride with it. Maybe this is just a blip. We've got, you invested in Alyssa Smith. That's a young player who we hope is going to get better, right? Again, all of the free agents that are potentially acquirable this offseason, there's a chance to really dramatically remake this roster. So never say never in the WNBA. Obviously, a lot of front offices have very itchy trigger fingers, and we saw that in the 2024 offseason. But I'd be pretty shocked if Becky Hammon was not the head coach of the Las Vegas Aces at the start of the 2026 season.
So I want to shift to the Indiana Fever, and they have been a very interesting team just because Caitlin Clark has been really struggling with injuries, just a high turnover rate, but yet they're 17 and 13. That's the recording of this podcast, sitting in the fifth seed in the Eastern Conference. Just want to get your feeling on this team overall, and just in terms of the turnaround and their prospects for the playoffs. And when do you think Caitlin Clark will be back and how she'll factor in? Because this has been kind of like a very I don't know, the fluctuations in terms of the vibes of the Fever has been very up and down this throughout the season.
Yeah, I think defensively they've really figured things out. I say this obviously terrible timing a day after they just got whooped by the Sparks offense, like had just no answers for them. But in general, I think their defense has really made an upswing. Over the last 10 games or so, they're one of the top few defenses in the WNBA. Uh, I think like that recent 5-game winning streak, they were second in the league in defense during that stretch. So uh, it's what you would expect, like the Steph White effect to be on a team, right? When you hire her, you want to improve on that side of the ball. And I think we've seen a better effort from Aaliyah Boston as like the hub of that defense. I think the personnel that they've added in terms of Sophie Cunningham, Natasha Howard really provides some structural integrity on like the forward line. Aaron McDonald's been so good at the point of attack. Like they just have so much better defensive personnel than they did a year ago. And schematically, it makes more sense with Steph White. Again, terrible loss to the Sparks, not accepted. But, the ceiling of this team is really based on what Caitlin can do offensively, right? Like Kelsey Mitchell's a special offensive player. Leah Boston's a special offensive player. They're not Caitlin, right? They don't just completely warp the geometry of a defense in a way that Caitlin does because you have to guard her 35 feet away from the basket. So I think this is like a very capable playoff team without her. And I would expect them to remain in like the battle for home court, as the last month of this season progresses. But I don't really consider them to be a playoff threat until we get Caitlin back and she starts to look like, the offensive force she was at this time last year.
Do you think you can attribute the turnovers to just her injury struggles, or do you think there's something else there? Because I'm kind of wrestling with that. Shooting is just, shooters go hot, they go cold. I mean, it's just,
Right.
she's a great shooter. So I'm not even really worried about her shooting percentage. But the turnovers have been a concern, her decision making. I'm just wondering, is that attributed to just what she's been dealing with physically, or do you think there's something else going on?
You hear all this talk about like sophomore slumps in professional sports where, teams get a chance to get a year of tape on you and all of a sudden they have a better idea on how to cover players, right? They have a better idea of how to execute a defensive game plan. And with Caitlin, it seemed like she came into the league and people already knew, like the Connecticut Sun were throwing doubles at her. They were blitzing her from game one of her rookie season, right? Like the book was already out on Caitlin as a rookie in the WNBA. So it's hard for me to say that like defenses have figured her out in her second season because this is what she was capable of as a rookie. The turnovers I kind of attribute to it's a very new team. Like Indiana only retained 5 players from their roster a year ago. One of them is like Damaris Dantas, who's become an increasingly like infrequent part of the rotation. So it's really just Lexi Hall, Kelsey Mitchell, Leah Boston. So anytime Caitlin's playing with a lineup that doesn't involve all 3 of them, like there's just a lot of new pieces, and I think the integration is always harder, right? Like Sophie Cunningham missed a lot of the preseason. Natasha Howard's a very different kind of player. Now she's got guards next to her who sort of move her off the ball in a way that she wasn't doing last season. So, if she'd played more often, I feel like we would see that like acclimation period happen. But Caitlin's only been able to play 13 games this season, and they're being obviously very cautious with her with this latest groin injury because you have 3 muscle injuries in the span of 1 month. Like that does not reflect well on a training staff. Maybe she shouldn't have been back to begin with. And there's just no use in overworking Caitlin right now when New York exists, Minnesota exists, and you just have a very long future ahead with Caitlin Clark. So I don't really think anything about Caitlin's game is like dramatically worse than it was last year. The shooting on the road is just weird. It's very weird that she cannot make a 3-pointer on the road because this is a girl who just like absolutely loves to shut up opposing crowds, and it has for the majority of her career, right? Like we've seen her do this at Big Ten environments. Did it against like big NCAA tournament crowds. It's surprising to me that the road shooting has not come around, especially because like with all due respect to these other teams, there are a lot of Indiana fans on the road too, right? Like they are all rooting for Caitlin too to make these shots. That to me feels like a very weird mental blip that it's going to sort itself out. Um, but no, I look at Caitlin, like her body seemed like it was in better shape coming into this season. I think the team has made upgrades around her. It makes sense. Uh, it's like a 13 game sample, right? If we were talking about a 13 game sample in the NBA and like making grand pronouncements off of it, like people would laugh us out the door, right? So I think it sucks that this is all we've gotten out of Caitlin Clark in year two because of how awesome her rookie season was on so many levels. But I remain very bullish on the Caitlin Clark experience. And I think even if this is the last that we've seen of her in 2025, like if they decide to shut her down for the rest of the season, it doesn't really change my outlook on what she's capable of going forward.
You know, speaking of injuries, so, Caitlin's played 13 games, but she's not the only WNBA star who has missed significant time or is out for the season. And it seems like, I don't know, from my perspective, and I think from a lot of others, there's been an increase in the number of injuries this year. What's your perspective on that? Does it seem like that to you as well? Just that we're seeing an increasing number of injuries and particularly season-ending ones. I mean, Courtney Vandersloot, I could go on and on.
Right. Well, we definitely had that ACL like just spate, right, with like Georgia Amore and Katie Lou Samuelson and Courtney Vandersloot all sort of one after the other, especially after Seattle's already lost Nico Mule and Jordan Horson for the season. Cameron Brink coming back from hers. The ACL epidemic seems like unlikely to go away anytime soon. Uh, the weird thing about the injuries is like you just count the number of players on the injury reports, and it is more than it was at this time last year, right? And yet the WNBA is operating under this like messaging that, oh no, our injury rate is the same as it was last year, nothing to see here, which is something that I asked Kathy Engelbert about during like the All-Star State of the Union she does basically every year. And she's like, no, we haven't seen a noticeable rise in injuries. Like player safety is of utmost importance to us. Obviously, we want our players to be taken care of. I it's like a very weird feeling when you know someone is lying directly to your face and like they're just doing it with like no compulsion about it. So that's very strange to me. Um, I I think part of the injury reason is something. I promise I'm not trying to always make comparisons to the NBA. It's just it's the other professional basketball league that exists, so it's a very useful point. Um, I think the game in the WNBA has just gotten so much more skilled and it's harder to cover as much ground and the pace is faster and what is demanded of every individual athlete on the court is so much more than it was at this point 5 years ago. And that is just hard on the body, right? Like all of the mileage you have to cover on the court and like the stamina and endurance and like chasing Sabreena Escu around the screens all around the court. Like that's a kind of task that didn't exist 5 years ago. Like she's a unique kind of player. Um, and I think that has just compounded soft tissue injuries, in the WNBA. Um, People point to the schedule. Like I think there were 32 games in the year 2021, and then it went up to 36, and then 40, and now 44. And it's basically the same calendar, from May to October, including the postseason. So adding 12 more games in the same condensed space, it's really hard. And it's obviously more wear and tear on players' bodies. Um, we like there's always talk about youth basketball, like what it does to players, just the amount of what shape they come into the pros already at, right? Like they're just basically broken. And you see this like on the baseball side where like players are just getting like preemptive Tommy John surgeries before they start their professional careers. And like you can't do that on the WNBA side. You can't just like repair a non-torn ACL. Like that's ridiculous. But there's just a lot of wear and stress already on players who have specialized for such a long time and played all of this AAU basketball and international basketball before they even get to college and the pros. And I think it's a culmination of all those things. And there's, unfortunately, women's sports science is like just criminally understudied and underinvested in. And there's a lot of athlete sports science, but a real lack of attention given to the fact that women's bodies are fundamentally different than men's bodies and require different recovery and like training, frankly, than with men. Just like the way women jump is a little different, the way they land, like their angle of their hips, it's all reflected in the fact that like you can't just apply the same things from women to men. You can't make them wear the same shoes, Uh, and hopefully, like this injury epidemic, I think we're seeing it in soccer as well, probably the other most popular women's sport in this country, or team sport, I should say. And hopefully that inspires like more interest and like research into women's sports science so that we can like try to resolve this. But um, I think there's a lot going into the injuries. Again, part of it is just like we're paying more attention, so we notice that these players are out, right? Uh, like Katie Lou Samuelson probably would have been like the sixth or seventh player on the Seattle Storm 4 years ago. Nobody's caring about the sixth or seventh player on the Seattle Storm, but we know that now. So like we're aware of all these things happening. Sort of how you feel like all the celebrities, are dying now. It's just because like everybody knows everything now, right? Uh, but yeah, I think the injuries are real. I don't believe what the WNBA says that it's not as prevalent, or it's as equally prevalent. I think that the rate is increasing, and hopefully, if the WNBA isn't going to do the research to figure it out, then like at least independent sports science has figured out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the NBA because I think we're seeing the same thing there too. I mean, we had 3 Achilles injuries for superstars in the playoffs.
Right.
It's it's insane, and I think to your point, there's I mean the differences between the bodies and all that, but also the way that people have to move to make the coverages for defense, and the way that you have to arch your foot to you know cross somebody over now.
Mm-hmm.
All the different things, all that stuff. I mean, it all makes sense. Another thing though that I wonder if it factors in at all is just the officiating. I know there's been a lot of frustrations with the officiating, and particularly from fans of certain players. There's been a lot of talk that the officials are, you know, letting a lot of things go, not calling fouls that should be fouls, that sort of thing. Is that a factor that kind of plays into this a little bit too? Just that beating up the body, wear and tear.
Yeah, so my colleague at The Athletic, Ben Pickman, wrote a story on officiating a couple years ago, 2023, and in it had a multiple like league personnel, not league personnel, I should say like team personnel, front office people and such say this is the worst officiating has ever been. And that was 2 years ago when we weren't really talking about this injury epidemic. And I think every time we talk to WNBA like general managers, coaches, and stuff, they say that the officiating is the worst it's ever been. Players think it's the worst it's ever been, and there are definitely systemic problems that affect WNBA officiating. The fact that the NBA official job is just a better quality of life. It's a full-time salaried benefit job, whereas WNBA officials, like you get paid by game. Most of them are officiating NCAA games alongside WNBA games. Uh, there's different rules, frankly, with both of those games. So like you're basically doing 2 different jobs. Um, and like the good ones get promoted to the NBA or reassigned to the NBA. Whereas if you're not as good, you just stay in the WNBA and you're just encouraging officials who are substandard, right, to stay in the WNBA. So I think there is absolutely a matter like that needs to be resolved with WNBA officiating. And I think the answer is pretty clear. It's money. Like it shouldn't be that difficult to figure out. And yet here we are. But I'm not really of the belief that officiating is like connected to the injury results we're seeing. I think might result in like a few more technical fouls being called, but I haven't really been able to make a connection between like play is a little bit more physical and like somebody hurts themselves. Like most of the injuries we're seeing that are like really damaging are the non-contact ones. So I haven't personally like really made the connection between one and the other. I do think, independently, and officiating is something that needs to be resolved, right? Like it should be better, but not necessarily for this reason.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like the officials are like at just a little bit above my level. I had to officiate one of my kids' games once, and
Yeah.
I remember just watch. It's hard. I remember just watching and going, "Oh man, call that!" And I'm like, "Wait, I'm the ref," So it's I get it. It's a tough job, but um, I think if you pay, like you said, if you just pay the people and give them like full-time jobs and make it like a
Make them
destination.
salaried employees, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you rather be a WNBA ref than an NBA ref? Like, in my opinion, with all due respect to both of you, I think women are easier to deal with. I think it's shorter schedule, so you have just like more time to spend to yourself, right? Like shorter games, 40 minutes versus 48. Like that seems like it'd be more preferable to ref. Uh, I think there's, like you said, there's a way to make this a destination that has not been done yet.
Yeah.
To that point, do you think, why do you think it just seems to me like you bring up the officiating, there's the chartered flights, there's all these little things that you would think to be solved by now. And with the league, blowing up in popularity, league expansion, exciting, college freshmen coming into the you know, athletes in high school gaining followings, like the game is growing organically from high school to college to the pros, but yet we're seeing just these obvious cracks in the foundation that should be solved by now. And that's why I've been highly critical of Kathy Engelbert, even though I've had other people debate me on this. Like, why do you think this has not been solved? This is obvious, like pay the officials
Yeah, yeah. So I
salary and
mean,
other things.
the WNBA like really wasn't experiencing uh like a regular consistent revenue stream since like 2023, right? Like this is the year where things started to turn, and then obviously
Sure.
2024 is this massive inflection point for women's basketball in this country. So, you know, chartered flights, like that's just a hard thing to stomach financially, right? Like you could ask individual owners to pay out of their pocket, but a lot of the owners who are in the WNBA are not like venture capitalists, right? Like they're people who essentially small business owners, WNBA owners, and it would be asking a lot of them to charter their teams at the time, right? And thankfully, they got that resolved in 2024, and will probably be codified in the CBA going forward. Uh, Officiating, not collectively bargained, something that the league, anything that the league like has to coordinate with the NBA because the officials come through the same pool as the NBA. I think it's a little bit more complicated because the NBA simultaneously hates losing money from the WNBA, but also hates putting any time to make the WNBA work. It's just fascinating duopoly there. So yeah, I think I don't want to get into like whole Kathy Engelbert good or not good at her job, but the WNBA just business wise is like in a dramatically different place now than it was even 3 years ago, and so it has the ability to address things now that it couldn't. And to their credit, like they've built out the league office staff, or like there's a marketing budget that never existed before. Like there are people who work on the digital side of things, like WNBA League Pass, pretty good product. Games are more widely available now. The experience of getting jerseys is a lot easier now. Like I don't know about you, but like I go to games now versus 2-3 years ago, and like there's actually merchandise available for people to purchase, right? Like the Sparks, only saying this because I'm based in LA, like signed Alyssa Peely to a 7-day contract. Her jersey is available for purchase. Like 2 years ago, you couldn't get a Candace Parker jersey for the Chicago Sky, but you can now get an Alyssa Peely jersey for the Los Angeles Sparks. So I think there have been a lot of improvements to the business of the WNBA, and it's hard to appreciate all of them because like the rate of interest and improvement has suggested that like these things should be happening faster. So they're working with a CBA that was constructed before the global pandemic, right? Like it's literally a different world ago that this document was written, and it's supposed to govern how athletes, are living their lives today. So I don't want to give the league too much grace because I think there's things that they could be fixing and doing a better job with, but I also understand that like the business is just different than it was, and
It's fair.
there have been a lot of improvements, and I am pleased with the growth that we've seen in the league. That doesn't mean that like they have to stop, right? Like everything has to keep going, right? Like we can't just pat them on the back and say like good job so far. Like this process has to continue.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like, and having been around this a lot, like a startup trying to
Mhm.
grow up into a real company, So you have
Right,
to
right.
change how you do business. I had and I don't want to influence you at all with your answer. I will say that I went to the first game of a charter WNBA franchise a long time ago. That team no longer exists. So if you had to choose a city that deserves to get a WNBA franchise, what city would be next, you think?
Um, I think about like the middle of America a lot and how like we're basically recreating like the NBA Atlantic and Central and like Pacific divisions in the WNBA, but like Northwest, Southwest, Southeast are just like not existent. Um, I've always thought that Tennessee would be a great spot for a women's basketball team. Like Women's Basketball Hall of Fame is there. Obviously, University of Tennessee with Knoxville. I think Nashville is like a really fun city to be in. Um, to me, like that's where I would want the next WNBA team to be. I was really excited when I saw that bid from the owner of the Nashville Predators. I think his name is Haslam. Um, that that's number one on my list. I think Nashville would be a great spot for a WNBA team.
I agree. I was hoping you'd say Houston, but I agree. Um,
Now,
Is that the one you went to, the comments?
it is. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
I did a
I
school book
what
report once on Cynthia Cooper's autobiography.
uh,
Ghostwritten, I think, but yeah.
she was amazing. She was just,
Incredible.
I mean, she was like 36 or something when the league started and was like
Just
just dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is an underrated story in sports that is underappreciated. Yeah, I feel you guys. A couple when we kept to overtime, Sabreena, but can we ask a couple of more questions? Is that
Yeah, we're good.
okay?
Let's do it.
Cool. So this is more league stuff. So just real quickly, I just want to get your opinion on this. Is a player safety issue. Just have fans throwing objects onto the court. I think you're endangering the player's safety, along with just so many other things that are wrong with the situation. The league did issue a statement, but I just want to ask you: do you think the league has done enough to address this more than just throwing the fans out and them getting arrested and banned from the arena? Do you think there's anything else do you think the league can do to just protect the players from the situation?
Yeah, I mean, considering the league issued its statement after the second incident, and we just had a night on Tuesday where one object made its way onto the court and reportedly two others were brought into the buildings and just like intercepted or fell short, like not enough has been done to stop it, clearly. I understand the league can't enforce arena security at all 13 locations around the WNBA. Like those are protocols enforced locally. Um, like there are clear bag policies at some arenas, for example, versus, different things that you can bring in, right? Um, that being said, like as you mentioned, it's dangerous. You could hit players. It's also just hugely offensive, right? This is a women's sports league, and like we know what they're throwing onto the court. And it's just disrespectful, the fact that like this is literally their place of work and you're disrupting that by throwing this, right? Like bright green flying objects. So, I was at the Los Angeles Sparks game on Tuesday when this happened, and it just honestly like took me out, like ruined my night. And it's just like very stupid, and I'm so disappointed with like the WNBA fan base, which has usually been so fun to be a part of, very, very protective, I think, of their league, but also just like super welcoming and inclusive. And like for this to happen is a huge, huge bummer. And like I think the WNBA just has to improve security protocols, like whether that's making calls to like 13 different arena officials, like that's your job. Like that's what you have to do. And if that means like you have to be a little bit more intrusive of people entering WNBA games, like it seems like these are pretty easy objects to identify. So, I think like maybe if it takes a little bit longer to get into a WNBA game, that'd be worth it for now, because like it's just unnecessary. It's unnecessary, and it's rude, and it's so many other things, but like it has no part in the WNBA.
And you know that these guys, after they get arrested or whatever, they just are going to end up on some right wing sports show where they're going to get
About
celebrated
that they've made, right?
Yeah, I've already seen some of that from some of those clowns, and it's just like, it's come on, what?
Yeah.
Why are you spending money to go to a game that you clearly don't like, and spending money on something, an object, and then throwing it out? I mean, it just I don't
One-time
get
use,
it.
right? Yeah.
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 Yeah, ridiculous. Another question for you. This will be the last one. The Connecticut Sun. A lot of rumors swirling about their future, particularly in Boston. What do you make of this in terms of really this kind of be a messy situation in terms of like the proposal not being presented to the WNBA Board of Governors? I understand that they have to approve any type of
Right.
move. Is that correct? So what exactly is going on with this? And do you think the Connecticut Sun, do you think they're gone from Connecticut? What's the deal with this?
Yeah, so I mean, if you notice, the last three expansion groups that the WNBA approved are all directly connected to NBA ownership, right? They are all with the NBA owners in those cities. And my assumption is that if the WNBA wants a team in Boston, which who wouldn't want a team in Boston? It seems like a great market to support a basketball team. And, the NWSL is adding the Boston legacy there. So clearly, like they vetted it in terms of being a women's sports market as well. My assumption is that if they want that they would want it to intersect with Celtics ownership, right? So the new owner of the Boston Celtics, Bill Chisholm, is the one who they would want to be helming the Boston WNBA franchise. And Steve Pagliuca, by buying the Sun or trying to buy the Sun and move them to Boston, is sort of like jumping the line, right? Like all these teams who submitted expansion bids and are trying to bring their cities into the WNBA, like I'm sure they would much rather just take an existing team and move it to their city. So I can see why the WNBA feels like they're going out of order, right? Like not respecting the overall process. That being said, like you have a financial duty if someone makes you an offer of $325 million to present it to your board of governors. I don't understand how it's possible that this was not like floated to the rest of like the governing committee of the WNBA. It's been something I've been trying to figure out over the past week, and unfortunately haven't gotten any reasonable answers as to how this is possible and why this would like happen. But I would suspect that if a team were to move to Boston, like I understand Pagliuca is currently like a minority owner of the Celtics, but I would think that the actual Celtics owner and like Bill Chisholm would be the front face of that happening. And if the Connecticut Sun were to move, it would be something more lateral, like the Hartford Sun, or like, I mean, you'd still call them the Connecticut Sun, but like they would play in Hartford as opposed to like Uncasville is what I would expect.
Oh, makes sense. Sabreena, thank you very much for spending the time. Truly appreciate it. Can you let our audience know where they can find your work on The Athletic, where you're available on social media, and you have any upcoming projects coming up?
Yeah, so everything I write is at The Athletic. You can just go to my author page or WNBA or women's basketball, whatever is your fancy, right? College season is honestly much closer than I anticipate. So it's going to be coming soon. We have a twice weekly podcast on all things women's basketball at The Athletic called No Off Season, which you can find wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. We video it. It's really fun. And if you haven't checked out like a couple series we did over the last month, we did this future franchise power rankings, sort of like objectively rating based on like 5 categories where each franchise sits, you know, with a 5-year future outlook, which is a really fun project to undertake. And then every year we do this series of anonymous polls with players where we just ask them like their opinions on 10 different things about the league. And all of those are, yikes, all of those are in on the site in July before the All-Star break. So those two endeavors took a very long time, and I've basically been on vacation for 2 weeks since. So yeah, that's like the last thing I like to promote.
Awesome. Thank you, Sabreena, very much. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.